Good afternoon, ladies and gents. So I thought I would do a little video today talking about Indian talking about what I was talking about yesterday by the video I did last night. I was talking about the vlog from Wednesday that they put out on Wednesday. And something that has obviously pissed a lot of people off and has angered a lot of people, I should say. And to be honest, I wasn't um, quite happy with it at the end of the day. I was talking about the fact that Chris had gotten Jace at Hooky didn't dare Mila or anything. And obviously, Jace was sat in front of Mila eating at Hooky, and Mila obviously got upset if she didn't have anything. I honestly thought that was so cool at the end of the day. The fact that he got Jace something, but then he got Jace Hooky, but didn't think that it didn't get me or anything. Like, you don't do that. You don't get one child something, but not the other. And this is not the first, and unfortunately, this is the saddest part about it. We've not seen, this isn't the first time we've seen that. They brought something for Jace, but not got anything for me. It's just not right. You don't do that. You don't get something for one child and not the other. Like, that's just a really cruel thing to do. I do feel like maybe Chase should have been made to share his cookie with Mila because obviously it was big enough for them to share. They both had about a piece each. It was big enough for them to share. And he obviously that's what he should have said to him. He should have said to him, if you don't have that at home, then you'll have to share it with Mila. He should have been made to share it with me. It was big enough for them to share it at the end of the day. Regardless of what people think about it, it was the most foul, disgusting, and cruel thing you can do to you can do to a child. You don't do things like that. You know, it's just absolutely disgusting, and you don't do things. As I said, you don't do things like that. There's no need to do. There's no need to do things like that. It is actually disgusting that people think that it's okay, that they would think it was okay and acceptable to do things like that and actually show that on camera. I would go as far as to say that it was actually evil what he did. The fact that he got Jace at hate, Jace at Hooky, but didn't get Mila or anything. And poor Mila was so upset. Obviously it was heartbreaking. Like, I just wanted to pick her up and comfort her and say, it's okay, because it was so upsetting seeing that, Jay, I can't imagine how that must have felt for her, having to sit there and watch her, her brother, her older brother, sitting there eating a cookie in front of her when she didn't have anything. That must be the most upsetting thing for a child to watch. Their older sibling that's got a cookie, but their dad and their father didn't bother to get them anything. And understand it a little bit with Aurora because obviously Aurora's still quite young. But they definitely have got a meal or something. They could have definitely, he did, it's like the fact that he got Jason cookie but didn't get meal or anything. That is incredibly selfish and a very, very evil thing to do. And it goes to show what sort of person Chris Ingham is. We've all known that we all know he's an evil scumbag. We've all known that for a very long time. And things like that prove just how bad they really are at times. Obviously, you can't really blame Sarah for this because this was something, this was, it was what, it was Chris did it, Chris brought, even, didn't get anything for Jace. It's like, you can't really blame Sarah for that. You put the blame entirely on Chris, at the end of the day, it's not, I don't think it's unfair to say that what Chris did was cruel. But I think for me, I think the saddest part about it is knowing that if you called them out for that and said, well, that was really cruel, you should have got me to something, for a fact that the IFL would jump to their defence and would try to say they didn't do anything wrong. But if you can look at that and think that they didn't do anything wrong, there must be something seriously fucking wrong with you. Because you know, why would you look at that and go, well, they did nothing wrong? You know, there was nothing bad about what Chris did. There was nothing wrong there. He did nothing wrong. Yeah, you know, I think anybody with an ounce of common sense knows you don't get something for one child and not get the other, and not the other. Which is exactly what Chris did. He for Jace, but didn't get nothing from me. Didn't get anything from me. And poor Mila got so upset because Jace was sat there eating in front of her, and she didn't have anything. How can anyone agree with doing that? With the fact that he did that to the child, he did that to Mila. That is pure evil. You know, it was probably the most evil thing I have ever seen. You know, I honestly don't get how anybody in their right mind can defend them over this. It is absolutely shameful. It was shameful and it was pathetic what they did. And they do absolutely 110% deserve to be called out for this because it was disgusting. It was terrible. It was so wrong. And I don't feel bad for saying that because it had to be said. You know, it was something that needed saying. You know, I honestly, to God, don't know what else to say. You know, I just, you know, I'm at a loss for words as to how anybody can think that what they did was okay because the reality of the situation is it wasn't okay. You know, I think you all know you don't do something like that to a child. You know, you don't get one child something but not the other. You know, that's the most vile and most cruel thing to do. You know, and if people think that what he did was okay, then shame on them. As that is extremely right. You know, no, they don't deserve to be given respect when they do things like that. You know, they don't deserve to have people sticking up for them and trying to give them respect when they do things like that are honestly so bloody cruel. Because what they did was so cruel and they deserve to be held accountable for that 110%. You know, I don't feel bad for saying that what they did was cruel and selfish and wrong, as it was. You know, it was absolutely wrong, and they do deserve to be held accountable for that. You know, and they absolutely deserve to be punished. You know, absolutely deserve to be had a go at for that because it was the most vile thing to do. You don't get something for one child and not the other one. Like it's just vile. And as I said, this isn't the first time they've done something like this. You know, they've done it a few times before. You know, and they'll quite happily do it again. And they don't give a shit, really, to be honest. You know, they're a pair of absolute morons. And if anybody agrees with the fact they actually did that, you know, the fact they brought something for James but didn't get anything for Mila, and shame on them as far as I'm concerned. To be honest, I think I would have been upset if my sibling had gotten something and I didn't get anything. Of course, Mila was going to be upset with that. You know, what did they expect? Mila was always going to be upset with that. You know, you don't buy something for one child and not the other. That's something that you never ever do because it's so bloody wrong to get something for one child and not the other, which is exactly what Chris did. The guy is a fucking moron, and he is vile. And things like this really prove just how vile he is. You know, I honestly felt so bad for Mila, so bad for Mila. You know, the other day, Mila, you know, the fact that she had to sit there and watch her brother eating a cookie in front of her, right, you know, in front of her, and she didn't have anything. As her obviously Chris hadn't gotten her anything. How fucking selfish is that? How unfair and how cruel is that? How can people honestly say that that's not cruel? Because that is extremely cruel. And they absolutely 100% deserve to be had a go at for that. Because that is fucking cruel. If ever, you know, the cruelest thing you can ever do is get something for one child and not the other. You don't do that. If you don't get something for one child, get something for the other one as well. That's what he should have done. He should have at least gotten something from Mila. At least gotten her at 8 or something like that. Not just got Mila, not just gotten Jason and not got anything from Mila. He is incredibly selfish, and he's teaching Jace to be selfish as well. I mean, the finish with Jace, his behaviour is already bad enough now. He has been pretty big. We've seen it in the vlog, in the vlogs, that they put out. He can be quite violent at times, quite spiteful at times, and so the thing is, and all I can say is that, I mean, obviously, Jace is only just coming up 6 now, right? But his behaviour is only going to get a lot. Obviously, when he gets older, his behaviour is going to get so much worse than it already is. It's gonna get so much worse, when he gets older. Chris and Sarah are in for a hard time when he gets older. They really genuinely are. They are in for an extremely hard time when he gets older. Obviously, we all know that they will live to hopefully be made to regret it. Oh god. I mean, the one thing I've noticed with Jace now is, even now, is the fact that he doesn't like not being the centre of attention. We've seen it in many vlogs where Sarah is actually paying attention to another child, to someone else, and Jace will start butting in because he doesn't like not being the centre of attention. It has to be said. But to be honest, I would go as far as to say he's a spoiled brat, as that is what he is. And I do, at the end of the day, that, you don't, as I said, as a parent, you don't do things like that. You don't buy your child one child something and not the other. It's actually quite a spiteful thing to do. I'm sorry, but someone had to say it is a pretty damn spiteful thing to do. And if you think it's right that they would do it to them, for them to do something like that, and you think it's okay to do something like that, then shame on you. I mean, of course, the iFan will think it was okay and won't see a problem with it, but you know, there is not a single person here, and there's not a single person who should be defending them over things like that. They don't deserve. They don't deserve to have people trying to defend them after when they're doing things like that. When they do things like that, they absolutely deserve to be called out. 110%. That's all I can say. So I hope you enjoyed this little video this afternoon, and I'll see you for another one later on. Bye bye.